question that's leading us it's leading us now. Is we established that the Mashiach is going to bring a two-pronged effect here: the secrets of the Torah, and also a change in at least there's one halacha of the shechita of the shur habar. That being said, we said they must be connected to each other. These two facts, the secrets and the shechita, they have to be connected to each other because they're both the chiddush of Torah Chadash Amiti Teitzei. So what's the connection? And in general, why is it that the secrets of the Torah had to come out in order to arrive finally at Mashiach's giving us his answer of the shechita of the shur habar, which was that l'chatchila, to begin with, a shechita like this was already in the Torah and it was kosher. It just wasn't known, right? So why is this idea of bringing its inner truth out from a state of concealment, right, and like basically revealing that it was already that way? Why is that all bound up with the state of revealing the secrets of the Torah? So maybe phrasing it like that gives it away a little bit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is he just revealing this like now, or is this like a known thing? That the shechita will...
No, he's revealing this now. Yeah, it's kind of exciting. You're in the know. Mashiach sharing his secret thoughts with us. So, but the question is, why are these two things bound up with each other? Revealing the secrets, and then suddenly the halacha changing due to that. So he says to understand this, we have to understand first the concept of Hillel and Shamai, that also by them we see that in the future there's a connection of revealing a higher state of intellect with the concept of halacha changing. Same principle, and we find it with Hillel and Shamai. Where do we see that? For 3 years, we said Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued about everything. These said the halacha is like me, these said the halacha is like me, until a baskol came out and said what? Huh? First they said Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim Chaim, a very famous statement, especially because we call Hasidus Dach. What does Dach stand for? Divrei Elokim Chaim, right? So we love this line. Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim Chaim. They are both words of the living God, but halacha kebeis Hillel, right? The halacha goes like Beis Hillel. So that's where we left off yesterday. Oh. So we didn't get to on the copies yet. It's on the copy before. We're going to get there soon. Page 181, second column, last paragraph. Didn't we have a whole segment of the class where we discussed that we don't pay attention to a baskol? Torah lo b'shamayim hi, right? Gesund. Why is it that the baskol was able to determine whether we go like Hillel or Shammai? Isn't that sort of against the whole principle that Torah lo b'shamayim hi? We don't hear Torah from heaven. The people have to figure it out down here. Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel havu ruba. So really, in reality, we didn't even seemingly need a baskol, because we always say achri rabim lahatos. There's a principle that you go after the majority, and the majority was Beis Hillel. So why do we need a baskol to tell us that the halacha was like Beis Hillel? Lo hutzrechu baskol ela mishum de Beis Hillel de Beis Shammai havu charifei tefei. This is interesting. They only needed a baskol because everybody knew that Beis Shammai was smarter. Mechadei tefei, they were sharper. Their arguments were better. Right? And like the idea, for example, if you look at footnote 45, we find another famous baskol. In Bava Metzia, there's an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim regarding this oven. Remember, you know the story about whether the oven is pure or impure, and he's trying to say that it's impure. The baskol comes down and he starts to make miracles basically, and he says, if I'm right, let the river run backwards, run its stream backwards. If I'm right, let the house fall down. If I'm right, let a baskol come out, right, and say that I'm right. The baskol came out and said the halacha is like him. Hepech haklal b'torah shehalacha karabi, right? And the idea is that It went against the principle that the majority rules, because that he was one against everybody. Once in a while you get a bas kol to come out, okay, but the point is that in our case, you had the bas kol come out. Why? You don't need a bas kol. Seemingly you could have just gone like the majority, and the bas kol anyway said to go like the majority. So what do you need a bas kol for? They could have just gone like the majority. In that other case that we mentioned, you needed a bas kol because it like seemingly undid the majority. But here, you needed a bas kol because they were unsure of themselves, because even though they were the majority, they knew Shammai was smarter. And therefore, to sort of like lock in that, to end the argument, say, okay, there's more of you, but you're not as deep as we are. So this is what happened. So the bas kol came out and sort of gave them the pat on the back there. Kolomar, which means to say, Bas kol ba lechalok al divrei Torah. In this particular case, it says that when the bas kol will come to go against the Torah, like we saw in the case of Rabbi Eliezer a second ago, then ein mashgichim bas kol. Guess what happens? In the case of Rabbi Eliezer, we don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer in that case, right? Because what did the Chachamim say back to him? This is the famous story. They say, great, you have a bas kol that goes along with you, but Torah lo b'shamayim hi. That's where we get this like this strong klal from that story. Am I losing you guys? Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Therefore, you could take your bas kol and take it home. We don't care because we're the majority, right? So when the bas kol comes to go against the principles of Torah, we don't listen to a bas kol because Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Ein mashgichim b'bas kol. Right? Aval kasha bas kol ba la'achriya b'makom shel safek. But when the bas kol comes to help us out of a safek, where we're not totally clear about what the principle of the Torah should be here, like for example the arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Why? Because according to the klal of Achrei Rabim Lahatos, according to the klal that you go after the majority, the halacha needed to be like Beis Hillel because they were the majority. But they were all in doubt because they knew that Beis Shammai was smarter than them. Charifim Yosem Beis Hillel. Their arguments were like unbelievable. They just didn't like go with them, but they had better arguments. So in such a case, Somchin al bas kol kevan she'ein zeh neged klal Torah. So in such a case, we do listen to a bas kol. The bas kol does have a certain precedence. Why? Because it's not going against the rules of the Torah. When do we say Torah lo b'shamayim hi? When the Shamayim decides to come and give us a principle that disagrees with the Torah that is already given into the hands of man. So we say, no, sorry, Shamayim, we already have it wrapped up, thank you very much. But when in the hands of man we ourselves are in doubt, so we'll take a little aid from Shamayim, and in this case, it just told us to go according to the principles of the Torah, Achrei Rabim Lahatos, and they were just in doubt because Shammai was smart. Is everyone, besides looking confused, is not confused?
But why did they go along with Hillel if they thought Shammai arguments were better?
When you say they, it's not like there was Hillel and Shamai were even in the picture. They weren't even alive anymore. It was their own arguments. Like in other words, they had their arguments and they realized that it's like you're playing chess. Your opponent has a better argument. You're not going to jump ship. Especially since often we're going to see that they didn't necessarily even understand the arguments of Shammai. That's why they didn't paskin like them. If they would have understood them and they were better, they would have had to paskin like them. But they were so deep. All they could realize is you guys are very deep. You know, you must be like learning some Kabbalah, but speak English because we don't know what you're saying. So you can't paskin like that just because smarter people paskin like that. You're not allowed to paskin like them just because you think they're smarter than bigger of a man than you. You have to understand it. And they didn't understand what Shammai was saying. You following all this?
I'm following everything you said, like up till now, just not connecting it back to could you connect it back to the main line of?
Yeah, so what the main question is, we're saying that in the future, halacha will change based on a new revelation of intellect that's going to come out, right? And that's the idea that the Shechita of the Shurabar is going to be changed because Mashiach is going to reveal the secrets of the Torah. Yeah. We're saying we find something similar regarding the laws of Beis Shammai, the halachas of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We didn't unlock it yet. But in the meantime, what we're saying is that they argued, and the halacha was like Beis Hillel, and a bas kol came out and said the halacha was like Bas Kol. Oh, there you go. Bas kol is the voice from heaven.
Bat kol.
Yeah, right. It's a voice from heaven, and it's said that the halacha goes like Beis Hillel. And the Rebbe was jumping in and saying, "Wait a second, why do we listen to a bas kol all of a sudden? Isn't that to go against the principle of Torah lo b'shamayim? The Torah is not in heavens, which was something that we ourselves spent time working on. Mashiach's not allowed to prophesize Torah because that's called Torah in the heavens, right? It has to be in the seichel of man. So why should we even listen to the bas kol telling us the halacha is like Hillel? So we said in this case, the bas kol did not go. It was basically just telling us what we already knew according to principles of Torah, because it told us to go along with Hillel, who anyway was the majority. And the only reason why we needed a bas kol in this case was was just because they were in doubt. Maybe because Shammai was so smart, we shouldn't go like the majority in this case. And because bas kol said, no, go like the principles of the Torah. You never go against the principles of the Torah. That's all we've said so far.
Okay.
Everybody on board?
One more time, what is a bas kol?
It's a prophetic voice.
Voice?
You don't hear these voices? What's wrong with you?
I hear about them from Yom Tov, but I never actually...
Right. Those are different voices.
I really wish I was...
That's a bas kol. It's a great granddaughter of a kol, and it's already changed its name and changed its identity. We're not even sure if it's Jewish.
What's
that?
Who is this voice coming to?
In this context, the voice came to all the students of Shammai and Hillel. They heard the voice of the bas kol. Yes, it happens. A bas kol is actually, it refers to a slightly lesser degree of prophecy. I'm serious, because a kol is a kol. It means a voice. A bas kol also means the daughter of a kol. So it's basically from like a slightly different, lower. It's not prophecy, mamish, in the sense that these people are suddenly called Navim.
Wait, the whole
It's
school
Ruach HaKodesh.
The whole school of Hillel and Shamai?
Yes.
Together?
Seemingly.
Are you sure it wasn't LSD day at the yeshiva?
Let's start davening.
What's that?
It doesn't imply female voices, does it?
I guess so. But a female means like it's a receiving voice.
It stands.
Oh, that they heard a female voice? I no, I don't think so. I don't think that's the simple meaning of it. All right, guys, let's get serious. What happened to the new guy? Threw him out? Anyway, Behektim, Klalos Habiur, Ba'pluktos, Shebetorah. So we have to first preface this conversation with an understanding of, in general, the arguments of Torah. This is anyway a kind of a deep principle here. All arguments in Torah, we're going to get into them for a second here. What are they all about? Where do they come from? Because if you know that at a certain point there was no arguments in the Torah. We talked about this yesterday, I think.
There were
Yeah.
years where they were in total agreement.
Many years, right? There was a certain point, basically in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, was the first time that even the first halacha became in question. Up until that point, everybody agreed on everything, which is strange. But it says that because our face value of Torah is that it's filled with arguments, and it's not totally unfounded that it's filled with arguments. Where do the arguments all come from? So it says in the Gemara, Divrei Chachamim Kadarbonos, right? Which basically means the words of the sages. I don't know. They're like gourds. I think it means gourds. Bale Asufos Nisnu Miroa Echad, right? And they're basically it's just a strange language from Koheles. We're gonna get to Perush of it, but it says Bali Asufos means there are people who gather together, and it was given from one shepherd. So basically, the Gemara explains what this strange verse means to us. What are these Divrei Chachamim? Right? What are the Bali Asufos? Basically, Asufos means to gather together. Those who are the owners of gathering, right? What does it mean? Elu Talmidei Chachamim. These are the students of Torah, Talmud scholars. Sheyoshvin Asufos, that sit in gathered groups. That's what it means. Bale Asufos in the pasuk means they're gathered. They Talmidei Chachamim that gather together in groups. V'oskim b'Torah, and they learn Torah. Halalu Tameim, v'halalu Matarin. Halal, not tameim, mitamein, right? These are saying that it's impure. These are saying that it's pure. Halalu osrin, halalu matirin. These say that it's prohibited. These say it's permitted. Halalu postlin, halalu machshirin. These say it's pasul, disqualified. These say it's kosher. Whereas you have a whole balagan, basically arguments of the Torah. Shema yomar adam. Maybe a person will say, as many sometimes sadly do, Heichanim lamed Torah me'ata. Forget this Torah. The rabbis can't even agree with themselves. How am I supposed to get involved? Maybe a person will say, how am I supposed to learn Torah? What's the law? Like, should I listen to Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yochanan? It's pretty good choices. Talmud lomar kulam nitna miro echad. So the pasuk continues by saying they were all given from one shepherd. Keil echad nasna. One God gave them. Parnes echad amram. One shepherd told them to us. Mipi adon kol hamasim, from the mouth of the master of all things. Baruch Hu, blessed be He. Okay, so basically, even though there's all these arguments, why is it that it's not a disjointed Torah and so forth, and it's just like a big argument that can't be settled? Because really, they all agree that they're all given from one shepherd, and one God said them all. There's a inclusion of all of them inside of oneness. And Dikasiv, as it says, Vayidaber Elokim as Kol Hadavarim Ha'ela. Sounds familiar? We just had from the beginning of the Ten Commandments. Elokim said all of these things. Kadib Isa b'Midrash, as the Midrash says, Al Kol Dibur v'Dibur, right? And this is an interesting little piece of information which helps us as well understand the arguments of the Torah. It says, not Al Dibur, Al Kol Davar v'Davar. On every, this is a Midrash in Yerushalmi Sanedrin, right? Midrash Tehillim, he brings it from here, based on Yerushalmi. That it says, on every matter was told to Moshe, Haya Omer Lo, he would say to him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would say to Moshe, Mem tes panim tameh, mem tes panim tahor. He would tell him 49 ways to make that this law could be contaminated, this object could be contaminated, and 49 ways that the same exact object could be pure. In other words, it came from Hashem, all the variations of different ways that you could logically say and give a reason for the contamination of this object. 49 different ways, which obviously 7 times 7, the whole spectrum of possibilities of contamination, and simultaneously with that, 49 ways of the whole spectrum of why this object is pure and cannot be contaminated. So Amar Moshe said, okay, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the world, Masai namod al biruran shel dvarim. If it could be, what's 49 plus 49?
98.
If it could be 98 different ways that we could paskin this halacha, every single halacha in the Torah, when are we going to get some clarity on this? What am I going to tell the people? They're going to say, okay, so what do we do? So I'm going to tell them there's 98 different options on every single subsection of every mitzvah. When are we going to get some clarity here? Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu achrei rabim lahatos. So Hashem said to him, no problem. You vote on every single issue and you go after the majority. And this is a deep, deep principle in terms of Torah.
Lehatot with a tet.
Yeah.
What?
This is a deep principle in Torah that
Lahatos?
lahatos means to veer. Which is that the whole Torah was given over. It's not like we're partners in making the will of Hashem literally. There's no such thing as that Hashem has His will and we just like enforce it. Even the will of Hashem is a fractal thing of like infinite wisdom that could go many, many ways. And what solidifies the will is it has to be understood by the mind of man that this is the most sensible direction of Hashem's will. And again, who's the man? We're going to see it's the Sanhedrin. And when they determine what the will is, so then Hashem also agrees that, yeah, that's my will. And then we know what the law is. It's very different than what most people think. It's really man's intellect and God's will are totally tied in together. So people want to say, oh, the rabbis only said that. You have to understand how laughable that is. There's no such thing as Hashem saying something without the rabbis like signing on and making it law because they agreed to it. Because basically every law could be understood in 98 different ways.
Is he describing
The process of judition.
that? And is he describing the difference?
Gourds, man.
Right. But is he also describing the difference between prophecy and like Mashiach's Torah? Is that what's going on right now?
right now, we gotta stay mamish on the Rebbe's page here.
Yeah,
He
'cause
is.
it's like getting like lost.
I know, but it's very step by step. You just have to not anticipate the answers to the big questions yet. Like he's going slow. So okay, we went step by step. First thing we said, we're trying to answer the big question.
Yeah.
Why is it that the shchit of the Shura Bar is only going to come out when the secrets of Torah come out?
Okay.
And we're going to see that there's some kind of a need for a new fangled intellect in order to understand the changes of halacha.
Okay.
A. B.
Yeah.
We see an example of that regarding the halachas of Shammai and Hillel.
Okay.
Okay? C. We see that the halachas went like Beis Hillel, even though Shammai was smarter.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And D. We now have to understand in general how law gets paskined, that it's based on the majority.
Okay.
Okay, so we're not answering any big questions here. We're just following the rhythm of the Rebbe here. We're going to get to our destination, but that's the flow.
What is the majority for Paskin and Halacha? How does that?
So this comes from this little midrash here.
How does that like fit into why we have to know that?
Well, it's associated with C. C was that even though Shammai was smarter,
Yeah.
the Bas Kol told us to go with the majority.
Oh, because
Because
there's more people.
There was more people like on the Hillel side than Shammai's side.
Okay.
Right? So basically the Bas Kol was telling us to stay with the principle of the Torah. You go after the majority.
Okay.
And now we're saying this is how the Torah works in a very essential way. That there is no such thing as Hashem's will without the majority of Jews. Because theoretically there's 98 different ways, 49 positive, 49 negative, of uncovering every single, like, is this idol worship? Yes for 49 different reasons. No for 49 different reasons. Okay, what do we do? Of any object, right? Of any law. Is this kosher? Is this cheese? Whatever you want to ask yourself, there's going to be a whole gamut of ways of looking at the property here. Bring the doctors, bring the scientists. Is this called turning on a fire? Is this called not turning on a fire? 49 different ways of every single possible thing you could imagine. Yes and no. So Moshe heard them all at the Torah, and he was basically like, I'm not going and telling them this. What's the plan over here? So Hashem said, not to worry, go after the majority. Whatever the majority will determine, that's my will. Yeah.
When we say the majority went with Beit Hillel, we mean that...
Beit Hillel themselves.
But isn't it rigged then?
No, Beit Hillel was... No, they chose to be on the side of Beis Hillel because that's the arguments they preferred.
Okay, but we're talking about people who were in the generation of the decision making. We're talking about people in later generations who agreed with.
No, the generation of decision makers.
Okay, and Beit Hillel constituted like
the students of Hillel.
Just the students of Hillel.
Yeah.
In other words, Hillel
but they could defect. They could defect.
Hillel was just more popular, like.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Big time. Big time more popular. He had a lot more people on his camp. Now they could have defected. It's not like they were like they were Kohanim and that they can't become a Yisrael. You know what I'm saying? They it was based on their intellect. That's why they became the students of Hillel, right? But they didn't defect, and maybe one of the reasons why we said it is even though Shammai was smarter, it was too complicated for them what he was saying. Like they couldn't latch on to his way of teaching Torah, basically, his understanding. So they stayed with their camp, which they understood, they all agreed with. Okay, so what are we up to? D, E. All right, so he said not to worry. We're going to go after the Rabbim Lahatos. Rabbum Meta'amin Tameh. If most of the people say in the court it's Tameh, it's Tameh. Rabbum Matarin Tower. If most of the people say it's Tower, and that's it. He says Shekama v'kama me'inyani Torah kefi shehem mitzad atzma. Many things from Torah as they are on their own, i.e. Chachmasu shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the wisdom of God, the way they can be understood by the Creator on their own without man interfering. Yecholim lios bebeso fanim hefchim. They could totally be two opposite ways, no problem for God. His understanding is great, right? So even by us, you could see that there's sometimes two opinions. We just sat here and argued for the last week and a half. Did the Torah come on the 6th of Sivan, or did the Torah come on the 7th of Sivan, right? So somehow in Hashem's mind, they both make sense, right? And it depends on us to sort of figure it out. I mean, that's a little bit different because it's an Inyan of Metzias, like what actually happened. But theoretically, it's the same on many, many things. Like it's either like this or it's not like this. In Hashem's great mind, which is beyond comprehension, it could be both, no problem for the Chochmah of Atzilus. Right? Shnei emes, they're both true. Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chaim, and that's the meaning of the word. These and these are the words of the living God. It's not just like a riddle. It's true. By Hashem, He has no problem understanding that two things can be true and totally opposite from each other at the same time. But in a world of Maisa, Olam Hazeh, where we do not live in a spiritual dimension where you could stuff, everything into the head of a pin, we need to have everything delineated clearly and yes or no, please.
Yeah, that's what the whole different kind of spin on that.
Yeah, this is deep. This is a very important principle. There's a lot of important principles in the Sikha, in general. So he's saying, Hachrab bezeh, so how do we determine it? Al pi daitam v'sichlam shel Chachmei Yisrael. It's very deep. Only so far as what the intellect and the opinion of the Chachmei Yisrael, of the sages of Israel, decide. Yeah. So if you look at footnote 53, it just sort of drives it home. Let's look at footnote 52 also. The footnotes in these sichas are also kind of off the charts because the Rabbi edited them and gave footnotes, so there's a lot of information in the footnotes. That's cool. So he says 52 goes on a previous concept. Just a moment ago we said in Hashem's wisdom there could be two opposite things, and it's not a problem for him. And he says, and he said we see an analogy of this, that's something we can bring down to our level. We can see right in the Torah that one seichel, one idea, can come out and bring two opposite midos, which is basically what we're saying, that Hashem's wisdom is so great that the way He understands it means that it could either be kosher or pasul, right? How is that? Because Hashem's understanding is so deep that it actually can produce two opposite midos, i.e. chesed and gevura, or kosher and pasul, could both come out of one idea. And we see that literally demonstrated in the Torah. And he says, for example, in the Torah, Kol yetzer machshvos libo rak ra. This is, by the way, this is a particularly famous example. It's brought often in Hasidus, just to put that out there. Because it is an example of this principle, which is an interesting principle. How can two opposite things come out of one? So the principle we find mamish right in the Torah. It says, Kol yetzer machshavos libo rak ra. Where do we see this? Does anyone remember these words? His whole desire of his heart is only evil. Emche es ha'adam. Therefore, I'm going to destroy man. When does Hashem say this?
Right before the flood.
Right before the flood. He's like, you know what? From the beginning, all their thoughts are evil. I'm going to destroy them. That's in the Parshas Noach. Then later on he says, not too much later, right? Actually, sorry, that's in Parshas Bereshis, right before the flood. That's in the end of Parshas Bereshis, where he decides on the flood before Noach. Then in Parshas Noach, when he decides to rebuild the world and never destroy it again through water, Ki yetzer leva adam ra minorav. He says that he says the exact same thing, that the yetzer of the heart of man is just evil right from his birth. Lo sif od lakos. Therefore, I promise not to strike him again and destroy him again.
The flood.
Yeah, fine. But the point is that because he was evil from birth, he decided to destroy him with the flood. And because he was evil from birth, he decided to never destroy him with the flood again. And it makes, you read it in the Torah, you never thought of it twice. It makes perfect sense. One is, because he's evil from birth, he's disgusting to me. It brings out my midah of din. I'm going to destroy this whole thing. One is, it brings out my midah of rachamim. Oi, the guy is evil from birth. What's he going to do with himself? Right? I'm not going to destroy him for that. I made him like that. So they both make sense. It's one idea, and it has two midos, chesed and gevura, that are the natural consequences of it. So too it comes from Hashem's wisdom. Everything in the Torah actually turns out like that. Because of an idea, it could be like this or it could be like this. So this or this is the idea of paskening. In a general sense, you have to know that the midos which is chesed and gevura primarily, that's where the idea of paskening comes from. Having to decide one or the other is actually not an Indian of intellect, if you think about it. The intellect, which is the Gemara, is just vast. We don't have any problem with Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim arguing with each other until the cows come home or until they don't. We are happy just seeing the brilliance of two different arguments, not one being able to, beat the other. And that's just like intellect loves it. Defend yourself, you defend yourself. I can stay in court all day long. The judge just loves it. Everybody has better arguments than the next. Unfortunately for the judge, he has to come and determine the law. Is he innocent or guilty? That's a whole nother situation called midos. It goes out of intellect into midos. And midos requires left or right. It does not allow for both. That's where Moshe was bothered. He's basically saying great, I love it up here, but I'm going down there where they need to know what to do. Which one is it? And that's where the principle, go after the majority, comes from.
And not to find the middle ground necessarily.
You can't go the middle ground because then you'll do nothing.
Can't be in the middle ground.
Right? You have to do something. Either not do something or do something.
It's paralysis by analysis.
Right. Not doing something is also called alosase. That's already getting into the category of don't do. So it's very, very complicated there. That was the footnote 52, which is interesting. Footnote 53 was going on the concept that it all goes according to the seichel of the Chachma Yisrael. We have to determine with our intellect what we think is right. And he says, just to prove, to sort of drive the point home, Devarim shebe'iyun v'svara, when it comes to things that have to do with, contemplation and looking into, ein navi adif mi chacham. Right? A prophet is not better than a wise person. Right? We learned this in the Gemara also. Chacham adif mi navi. And this is what it's meaning. A chacham is called adif mi navi. It goes out a little bit out of the simple context. If you've learned that Gemara sort of means something else with it slightly. But the easiest way to understand it is a chacham is greater than a prophet. And it says that Elef Nevi'im ke Eliyahu v'Elisha, even if you have 1,000 prophets on the level of Eliyahu Navi and Elisha, his student, and Elef Chachamim ve'echad, and you have 1,001 Chachamim, halachat ka Chachamim. The law goes like the Chachamim. You say, what? These people are prophets, and there's 1,000 of them. Nope. Halakha goes like the Chachamim.
1,001 ignoramuses, it also goes that way.
No, you can't just be in the court of Israel. It's not like we can get together and decide, you know what, we're going to be the majority of this yeshiva. It's not. You need the Chachamim. It's not just you go after the majority. It's not like a courtroom of peers. What do they call it? When you have a jury of your peers. It's not a jury of your peers. It's a jury of the leaders of Israel.
It's not really a democracy.
It's not 100% democracy in the realm that everybody gets a vote. But it is 100% democracy in terms of if you earn a vote, your vote is equal to a prophet's vote. Right? You have to be in the Sanedrin, though. You have to earn your vote. You have to be mamash chacham. There's a very famous sipur from the Rabbi Rayatz that he was walking by a group of Hasidim that were sitting out for bringing. One was saying communism is better. One was saying democracy is better. Capitalism is better. They were going through monarchy is better. They were all arguing. Anarchy was in there, maybe, and he was and basically he went and he asked his father, the Rebbe, and he said all of them are found in the Torah. In other words, you'll find areas which is democracy. You'll find areas which is monarchy. You'll find area which is anarchy, probably. I don't know about anarchy, but it's a good chance. Anyway. So here you have somewhat of a democracy, but democracy is only taking place inside of the Sanhedrin. And again, even if the king of Israel comes in and tells them no, you tell the king to go home, right? Because basically, in that capacity, it's not a monarchy, right? When it comes to Torah in that sense. Okay, so going back inside.
On the surface, it looks like there's no absoluteness there. It's all relative, but that relative actually isn't absolute because it's you said what's the majority and most people around the world think God is what He says and that's what it is.
Exactly. Because most people don't have a handful of Jews working for them. No, I'm serious. The Jews are part of the God. That's the thing. That's why our religion is just totally different. There's not God and man in that way so clearly delineated, right? If it was, then you wind up with a lot of antiquated laws because basically God said you have to cut people's heads off. Let's get going. You know what? Our God also says that. Says that right in our Torah. They got it from us. But we're not cutting people's heads off because we're part of the God's decisions, basically. Man and God in the Torah is like linked up, so people can't figure that out. It's like, wait a minute. If it's just man, so that's why you find a lot of Jews that are just like, they're liberal. They're not looking. And if it's just God, you find people who are mamish crazy extremists that don't. Yiddishkeit is this beautiful fusion of God and man, and it only exists in Torah because the only partners that Hashem decided to link Himself up with was Chachma Yisrael or Am Yisrael. So basically, it doesn't exist, this kind of beautiful symmetry.
Then the Reform and conservative people can say the same thing.
Except they're not invited into the Chachma Yisrael if they're kofar in Torah to begin with. You have to be on the level of a Chacham in order to have an opinion. Otherwise, they're right. In other words, they're getting the idea from the Torah. It's just that they're confusing that idea because you can't enter into the conversation unless you're already mamish wise in Torah. The real place where this started was like in Mendelssohn and the original reformers. They were Chachamim, but they were not the majority. And so they should have been like X'd out to begin with. The problem is they also became like heretics, and they trained generations of people who were ignoramuses who held themselves to be the majority, and we got into the situation we're into today. So let's get ourselves out of it. Anyway, so going on inside. So God said not to worry, go like the majority, the Chochmei Yisrael, Kedas Harov, the second to the last line, bottom, first column, 182. Kedas Harov, like the opinion of the majority. Kefi Raos Einehem, according to what their eyes see. And this is an important principle as well. Ein lo ladayan elama she'einav ro'os. You cannot just stamp paskin because your friend next to you paskin like that, even in the Sanhedrin, right? Because you can only paskin according to what your eyes see. You have to get it. You have to own the decision in your own intellect. The kol davar v'davar lefi inyano, every single thing in its own way, in its own, according to its own concept that you're working with. Okay.
So, was there some special? Did they each give their decision without knowing what the others?
Yes.
Because it's a natural thing.
Yeah, you're totally right. But there was things put into place. Man, the English is just basically a goner now. But I'm just going to say things in place of whatever proper word there is. There was things put into place. There were things put into place that made the Chachamim have to sort it out on their own. There was a whole process of the judicial system where they had to break up into teams, then break up into pairs, and then go sit individually and come up with a decision on their own before they came back in Pastin. That was a part of every heavy-duty case had to go into that process. And not only that, I think we're going to see it inside. They had to paskin what we call minat tzad, from the side. Because I just mentioned a minute ago, if the king of Israel even came into the picture and said such and such, you don't have to listen to him. That's not exactly true. Because oftentimes the king of Israel was also the greatest chacham of Israel. So you do have to listen to the greatest chacham. So in order to get out of this problem, where if the greatest chacham says, you sort of, right, you have to listen to your rabbi, what are you supposed to do? The Rebbe says, and you're going to have a different opinion all of a sudden, that's sort of like a problem. So they would start with the lower people, they called from the side. The Sanhedrin was ranked. It's a very, very deep situation over here. Not only was the Sanhedrin ranked, but there was 23-member court that sat outside of the Sanhedrin, and there was another 23 court that sat at the foot of the Harabais. And they were all ranked, literally. You are 87 judge number 87 in wisdom. No, I'm saying, but there was 24, wow. 23 more, and then 23 more than that.
Oh, beyond
the 72. Wow. And if the 72-member guy would Chas v'Shalom pass away or go out, one guy would be chosen from the next court down to go up. One guy would be chosen from the next court down to go up and take that place. It was a total ranked system of wisdom. Everyone knew who was above them. Crazy. And by wisdom, not by age. In other words, it was an unbelievable level of the whole thing. There was no NFL, hockey or baseball. We put our money and our resources into chachamim. So we had mamish Rebbe cards instead of baseball cards. Everybody knew exactly what was going on.
So without the Sanhedrin, how do we make decisions?
So we have things in place. We have still batim. First of all, we have a lot of laws that were agreed upon,
Cut off.
that we take from there.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we don't,
Oh.
okay, we'll get into this in a second. That's another question. But my point I was saying is that they would start from the side, which means when they would vote on any issue, they would have to start with the lesser chachamim, and only at the end get the opinion of the greater chachamim. So you would not vote. This was another measure. That's the word I was looking for. This is another measure that was put in place to stop this thing from happening that you're worried about. That you're gonna, by nature, listen to your friend and sort of paskin what he paskins. So they did it in such a way that the lower ones paskin before the higher ones, and you would never get into that situation that you would just sort of be dragged along. The wiser guy was not going to just paskin because the lower guy said it. He had his own understanding of the thing, right? So this is how it all worked.
In other words, the lower guys voted
First.
in order,
Yeah,
and the higher guys aren't going to listen to the lower guys.
right, exactly.
Even
But
though the lower guys might listen to the higher guys.
right, so we had a measure in place to make sure that didn't happen.
Okay.
And the king of Israel, or the Av Beis Din of the whole Sanedrin, he had to go last.
Those guys were smart.
I'm telling you, they knew what they were doing. So let's just look at this other. I love the footnotes, really, for what we can gather from them. Let's look at footnote 55. He says each thing has to go according to your own understanding, what your eyes see. Now he says we have a little question in that. It's going to take us like 3 times as long to finish this mimer with the footnotes, but I still think it's worth it. He says, Gam al pi hamavuar bekam makomos, even according to what it says in many places, where we find in the beer of the Zohar of the Mittler Rebbe, particularly, he gives us a little place to look there. Tanaim v'maroim hagdolim, the big sages of the Mishnah and the Gemara period, they would know the halachas of Torah as they were above. In other words, they would like peek into Yetzirah and check out what the halacha is. Hibi means to peer. To peer. And according to that, they would paskin. So that's a problem according to what we're saying to a certain degree, because it has to be a seicheldik thing. They have to understand it. So you can look and like see in Shamayim what the halacha is. That's not exactly going with the principle of, of the judge having to determine it based on his own understanding. So the Rebbe says, don't worry, we can fit it all together. They would only paskin after their seeing above would descend into and enclose itself into a human intellect once again, much like we said, like Mashiach is going to do. Different level of prophecy, but similar idea that he's going to see sort of like the halacha in its mystical sense, and then he won't paskin based on that. He's going to understand it, translate it into like a language of humanity, and only then give his opinion. So ultimately, when he wound up speaking in the Sanhedrin, he wasn't like talking angel talk. He was still sort of, but it's still, we can see how great these people were, that it says, for example, Hillel was always paskining to be permissible because his soul came from chesed and he sort of saw things from the side of, it doesn't contradict the fact that they brought it through their own intellect and they paskined according to what their eyes and their minds saw. And therefore there's also no contradiction here to the principle again of lo b'shamayim hi. You can't look at the heaven and find out the halacha, you have to figure it out on earth. So that's what they did, they enclosed it into their own seichel. Okay. Oh, I think we have to hold here.
How would that not influence their thinking?
Even if it did influence their thinking, it didn't. It was no longer a matter of just like hearing it from someone else or something. Like they got it. The fact that they were leaning in a certain direction because of that's not a problem. Anyone's anyway leaning in a certain direction. Because of their third character, you're going to lean in a certain direction.
What's so amazing about this is,
Thank you.
documentation of my pressure